Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into something huge. Can you actually train your brain to be an elite multitasker? You know, to handle all these complex jobs with just flawless efficiency? It's a promise we see everywhere, right? But we're going to look at what the science really has to say about it.
But maybe we should back up for a second and ask an even more basic question. Is what we call multitasking, is it even a real thing? Or is it just some kind of cognitive illusion? And that brings us to this idea of the supertasker. And trust me, it's not about someone who can magically do two things at once. It's something way more powerful.
And, this whole deep dive was actually sparked by a really fascinating scientific debate kicked off by cognitive neuroscientist Professor Joseph Devlin. His questions totally challenged the popular story we all hear, and they opened the door for us to look way deeper into how a high-performance brain really works. So today, we're basically walking you through that exact conversation.
All right, let's get into it. Here's what's on the docket. First, we'll redefine what a supertasker actually is. Then, we'll get into this awesome theory about the bilingual brain being a kind of cognitive engine. After that, a little scientific reality check. What are the real costs of multitasking? That's going to lead us to the secret sauce of peak performance, something called automaticity. And then we'll wrap up with how you can actually use all this to build a more efficient brain. Let's go.
Okay, first things first. Let's really unpack this whole supertasker idea. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but what is it really from a brain science perspective?
Okay, this slide right here, it completely flips the script on what we're trying to do. The way most of us think about it is juggling, right? Just desperately trying to keep all these balls in the air at once. But the expert view, the one backed up by neuroscience, says a true supertasker isn't juggling at all. Nope, they've achieved this elite level mastery over their own attention. So it's not about doing more things, it's about being in complete control of your focus.
So that leads us to a really compelling theory. What if there was a natural, lifelong training program that could build this exact kind of attention control? Well, a lot of researchers are now thinking that speaking two languages might just be the ultimate cognitive workout, one that can literally rewire the brain for top-tier performance.
And here's the why behind it. The brain's command center, its CEO, is a system called executive function. Now here's the wild part. For someone who's bilingual, both of their languages are always on, always active in the brain, and they're kind of competing for resources. This forces their executive function system to constantly manage the situation. It's like a non-stop mental gym session.
So this constant management sharpens three key skills. The first one is called inhibitory control. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like the brain's built-in noise-canceling headphones. To speak in just one language, a bilingual person has to constantly and actively push the other one down, and that trains their brain to tune out irrelevant stuff on command. Pretty cool, right?
Next up is cognitive flexibility, which is kind of like being mentally ambidextrous. I mean, think about it. When a bilingual person switches languages, they are instantly swapping out entire rulebooks, grammar, vocabulary, even cultural ideas. Doing this over and over again builds incredible mental agility.
And finally, we've got working memory. Think of it as your brain's temporary scratch pad. The constant effort of managing two active languages puts a much higher demand on this system. And just like a muscle, that extra load seems to actually increase its capacity and its efficiency over time.
So you can really see the cycle here, right? The bilingual brain is in this constant state of selecting, suppressing, and switching. It's this continuous high-intensity workout that trains the brain to become incredibly nimble and efficient at managing its own attention.
Okay, so it's a really powerful and, frankly, elegant theory. But what happens when we actually put it under the microscope? What does the latest research say about the costs of multitasking for, well, the rest of us? Let's take a look at the evidence.
And this is where Professor Devlin brings up a really critical point. He says that while the initial hype was massive, more recent studies suggest that everyone, bilingual or not, pays a really heavy cognitive price for switching tasks. The fundamental laws of how our brains work still apply. So the real question becomes, can some brains just get better at paying that price?
And this number? Wow, it really drives the point home. A huge study in Cambridge Core found that when people were forced to multitask, their performance just cratered, dropping by an average of 23 points compared to when they did the work one thing at a time. And this penalty, it's universal. It affects everyone, with no advantage for gender either. This drop in performance actually has a name. It's called the cognitive switching penalty. Every single time you switch your attention, your brain pays a tax in time and in mental energy. It has to do this thing called thrashing. which is basically effortfully unloading all the context of the old task and then loading up the context for the new one. It's metabolically expensive, and it's really the root of all multitasking inefficiency.
So, if we can't just get rid of the switching penalty, how do we get around it? Well, this brings us to the real key to high-level efficiency, a fundamental principle of the brain called automaticity.
So what is automaticity? It's the process of practicing a skill so much, so intensely, that it moves from being a conscious, high-effort thing to an efficient, subconscious one. It's all about making a skill so deeply learned that it just runs on autopilot, using up almost none of your conscious mental energy. And this slide really shows you just how huge that shift is. A controlled process, it's expensive. It requires your brain's CEO, the central executive network, to be fully engaged, hands-on. But when a process becomes automatic, it just hums along in the background with a tiny energy cost. The CEO network actually gets to step back, freeing up your very limited attention for whatever really matters.
And we see this stuff everywhere in our daily lives. I mean, when you're walking and having a conversation, you're not consciously thinking, okay, left foot, now right foot. Or when an expert pianist is playing a masterpiece, their fingers are just moving flawlessly while their conscious mind is focused on the emotion of the music. These are incredibly complex skills that have become effortless through tons of practice.
Okay, so how do we actually apply this? The goal isn't to get better at juggling. That's a losing game. The real goal is to intentionally convert the effortful tasks in our lives into these automatic, low-energy skills. That frees up our brain's CEO to focus on the one thing that matters most in any given moment. So here are the core strategies. It all starts with monotasking. That means focusing deeply on one thing to build a skill without constantly paying those switch costs. It also means chunking similar tasks together, like, say, handling all your emails in one block. You also have to consciously take control of your environment, and believe it or not, you can even use advanced techniques like dual task training, where you intentionally add a distraction to force a primary skill to become even more deeply automated. It's a bit counterintuitive, but it works.
And this right here is the key takeaway of this whole thing. What looks like supertasking from the outside, it's not some magic superpower. It's the end result of strategic, deliberate practice that makes excellence feel and, in a very real neurological sense, become effortless. The true goal isn't juggling more. It's mastering your attention by automating your skills, freeing you up for what truly matters.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Just take a second and really think about this. Out of everything you do, what is the one single skill that, if you could make it completely automatic, completely effortless, would most profoundly transform your work and your life? Because zeroing in on that one skill, that's the real path to becoming a supertasker.